So we're here with Alistair, whose alias is Nug Nug. Is that right?
No,
Yeah. And just got a few questions. So what part exactly did you play in the rise of Altair? What was what kind of bits did you do for the album when it came out? Right, yeah. Okay, yeah. Amazing. Cool, yeah. And what kind of parts of music making do you enjoy most? Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Well, how did you plan to incorporate Nug Nug into your music making, Mark?
um, I guess he just sits in every session and he tells me whether it's good or bad.
Right. Yeah. Of
You
course.
know,
Yeah.
his reactions dictate pretty much every song's direction.
Yeah. And so the chemistry between you guys is like it's good. Yeah. It's like
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good.
amazing. Hello, wonderful people. Connor Whitmore here again with another video for you on the Nawtystep channel. And you might be thinking, well, I don't really recognize this environment, this setting that I'm in. But I'm actually in Canada. I have been for a few days now. And in this moment right here on camera, I'm joined by the legend that is Marc Diztex, formerly known as TenGraphs, now known as...
Altair.
And yeah, we're here doing a little interview. I've been here. We went to El Sonic, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic time. How did you find it?
Oh, I loved it. Performing there was probably biggest career goal at this point, and it was above all expectations the best show I've ever played.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into more detail with it as we go on, of course. But just as a quick kind of a brief summary, a quick overview, how long has that kind of been in your mind as a thing to like do post TenGraphs, would you say?
So considering a rebrand started probably a year before COVID, but realistically it took shape back in January.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of getting tired with the whole like dark vibes, and after my son being born, I kind of had a different outlook on life. So it didn't hit the same for me anymore, writing all the dark stuff, writing all the horror based stuff. As much as I love writing for horror, like for film and video games, my own music, I couldn't relate to it anymore.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. So that's quite a quick turnaround though.
Well, I mean, two things about that really make it where it worked out is one, when I committed to it, one of the biggest things that I did right off the bat was gather a team together. I already had a few people in my team, but I really made sure to have all bases covered. The second thing that happened is after writing the first single, I sat down and started working on the album, and we pumped out the entire thing in like a week and a half, not even. All the demos were done. So that really made the rest of the process a lot easier because then we could already start working on visuals. We already had Ilsonic booked as TenGraphs, so it was easy to plan accordingly. And then rather than just, scramble on a rebrand where we didn't know what the direction was, we didn't know what we wanted to do with it, we already had all these steps that we could plan for much faster and much more efficiently than if I was just, starting a brand new project with no direction.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Like I said, and saw the show, of course, at the festival. It was one of the best. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
Just so much going on. The range of the music as well. It's a very clear step in a different direction from TenGraphs, and I love that. And it seems like you've got it completely under lock, and it all seems great. Obviously, like I said, we are going to be talking about that more later on as we get through this podcast. But I think the main aim with this was for you to kind of, you wanted to set an example and kind of pave the way and show people in this scene who perhaps things haven't gone as well for them, your own journey and how you got into it yourself.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of this. So I think it would be good first off to give like a little like, oh, why is Nawtystep here? Why is Connor here? Why is this podcast a thing? From your perspective, how would you kind of...
Yeah. I think one of the first things is when I first discovered your channel, because that was back in early 2020, um, one of the big things that really struck me was you didn't care whether or not you were being blunt about things. You just said things as they were. And that's something I heavily relate to. I've been doing track feedback for 5+ years at this point, through teaching, through live streams, um, and all the mentoring I've done over the years. And one of the big things that was important for me was always be as genuine, authentic, and raw about your feedback as possible. And a lot of people don't do that. So when I saw the channel, I was like, I like this guy. And in the beginning, just watching all of the YouTube content, and then migrating over to the live streams on Twitch, I started paying more and more attention to what you're doing. And when I sat down and really fleshed out what the mission of this project was going to be and why I wanted to push further than what I had done with TenGraphs, one of the key things was I want this to feel as genuine and transparent as I can make it, so that there's no glorification on social media. There's no like, oh, this is a pretty happy story of success. Like that's not reality. And I think some artists do, to a certain extent, discuss what was harder in their careers, but they don't make it the highlight as much. And I really want to make that the highlight, and I don't think anybody else would have been able to ask the right questions besides you to
Sure.
get to that point.
No, I appreciate that a lot. I mean, yeah, that's absolutely what the channel is about, just being as, like you said, raw and genuine and honest with the coverage as possible. And I really hope that we're going to get to the nitty gritty with
Oh,
this
we will.
conversation.
We will.
So, I suppose moving into that kind of ballpark, then, it is your story. So I kind of feel like I want to pass it off to you in terms of where we begin with it. Is there a particular point that you would like to begin with, like post 10, well, pre 10 graphs, of course, but within that, which where's the point where the story begins, as it were?
So over the years, I've been asked the question a lot, like where, when did you start making music? When did you, start DJing? When did you start producing? All those questions, for a long time, I thought I had the answers to. And then over the last, I would say like 3 years, 4 years, I really realized the story starts so much sooner than I thought it did.
Mm-hmm.
My first interaction with music, I was in elementary school, or even in kindergarten. I think, I can't remember. I was that young, and I was in choir. And in choir, we had like a Christmas mass, right? And I choked on the night of Christmas mass in front of hundreds of people and started crying and ran to my parents. And so my parents' reaction, like any parent, would be to, okay, well, let's just go home. But what that did to me, and not to blame anybody for this, because my parents did what they thought best. But what it did to me is it scarred me from a stage performance standpoint, if you will. So any kind of like oral exam, any kind of speaking exam or anything like that throughout school, I would just freeze. So that caused a lot of trauma through a bunch of kids picking on me, all of those things, and then compound that to the fact that I was very nerdy at school, and the shortest kid in class throughout my entire school years. I was just alone all the time. So that's really where it actually starts. And that's something I realized recently, is like the story does start there because it's what shapes the rest of it. Right. So walking out of high school, I did a whole 180 because I was tired of being this like lonely, quiet kid. And I started, playing an act. And that got me into a lot of trouble. I started doing drugs. I started selling drugs. I started doing a bunch of really fucked up shit. And that led me down the rabbit hole to a point where it was just pure chaos. And on the music side of things, what happened is throughout that, I tried to keep making music. So when I got into high school, I joined the orchestra, and then I got laughed at for that. Then I said, okay, well, fuck the orchestra. I'll start my own band. Did a metal band for a couple of years. Then I got laughed at for that as well. And it kept on happening for every new musical idea that I would come up with. Even though, I was in a classical guitar group, and we won second place in all of Quebec. And people were still finding reasons and ways to laugh at me. So that was a big thing. It really scarred the path multiple times through and through. And by the time I started DJing and playing electronic music, I was still being kept out of the loop, still being put aside, no matter where I would go. So by the time I started producing electronic music and started, making dubstep and all that, had already been making drum and bass and metal for a while. I had been doing hip hop for a while. But by the time I really got to what led to me being here now, I was just so deep. I was just so deep. Um, and that led me to, using drugs beyond most people's comprehension. It led me to overdose. It led me to homelessness. And then I checked myself into rehab and started taking it seriously. And that happened when I met Sven, Code Pandorum, aka Now Inhuman. And he's the first person that ever looked at me and said, "You could be a great musician." Before that point, nobody had ever said that to me in those words. Somebody that there's people that had said, I had fans at the time, but somebody that I looked up to say that and that in that period was so important to where I'm at today, because it really shifted my own view of myself. It gave me a reason to try. So from that point forward, then I really started, doubling down. I went to rehab. I got sober. I got all my life stuff in order. And then I started working on music very seriously. I took that shit so seriously that I probably burned myself out 3 times over and didn't notice. But that was the point. I had nothing left to live for but that, but it was that important to me.
Right.
And so I did, he gave me a role at Crow's Nest. So I did Crow's Nest for a long time. We spent so many years working on that. We spent so many years, building this whole niche genre up. And it really helped put me in a position where I started feeling confident with music. Then after that, ego got in the way. The ego got in the way, I want to say, 2018, 2019. And when ego got in the way, I realized it, and I didn't know what to do about that. And I didn't know how to deal with it either, because there was a lot of other components happening in my life simultaneously. And that made a lot of things really conflict with each other at the same time. And I started losing interest at that point. That's where it started trickling down. But I kept on having these really cool creative ideas. The Ghoul King EP came up at that point. And then I had all these other character EPs, and I had this whole storyline written up that I had pulled from a D&D campaign that I had written younger. But it never felt entirely what I wanted to do on a long-term scale. Right. So I was still coming back to I want to write metal, or I like writing pop. And it was never enough to just do the horror stuff. And the pandemic hit, and I kind of put all of that aside. I worked on a lot of professional contracts. And then I just started having fun with music again. Sarand and Ragin started coming to the studio. We started working on music, and I saw through their eyes, basically, the passion that I had once had for music that I had lost. And that helped bring me back to this space of I'm really enjoying music again. And then compound that with, back in March of 2020, Adventure Club had hit me up to collaborate on a song. They wanted to do something that was a mix of heavy and melodic, right? So that really, in the beginning, I was shocked. I was like, whoa, why me? Who am I that Adventure Club, of all people, want to work with me? And I had imposter syndrome for 2 years. I was overthinking the absolute fuck out of that song. I wanted to sing on that song so bad, because I had promised to myself that the first time I would sing would be on a song that meant something to me. And I was also going through a bunch of personal shit at the time. So that song meant a lot to me, both in the lyrics that I wrote, in the song itself, and just the opportunity. So it was such an important thing that I had mad imposter syndrome. But it also opened something up to me. It made me realize I'm writing music for myself, and I want that music to have an impact. So I really doubled down on, what are my roots? Why am I here? What am I trying to do? And I spent 2 years kind of just not thinking about the TenGraphs project, not thinking about all these like external factors, and just refocusing on like, okay, what do I like doing? How am I able to do this? And through the mentoring that I was doing for other people, that really brought I'm teaching all these kids how to do this. I did it for myself once. Who says I can't do it again?
Right.
You know? And I mean, yes, I'm older. I might not necessarily have the same amount of energy I had at the time, but now I have a kid. You know, I have twice the reason to work my ass off. And so that was really a process. It brought me all the way to like, okay, I'm teaching. The whole thing about Dream Chaser, as an example, is I'm teaching this class to this one student, and he's like, oh, like, you know, this one song, I think it was a song by Akuma. I can't remember, but he was like, how can I get like these types of patterns? And I showed him how to do the pattern, and then the drop for Dream Chaser just sort of happened. And I was like, wait, this is actually really good. So I kind of looked at him. I'm like, do you mind if we like go over time, but you just watch me like work through this workflow? And he was like, yeah, sure. Because him and I have done that a few times. So for the next 2 hours after that session, it was just me speed running this song while he was working on one of his tunes at the same time. And 2 hours later, Dream Chaser was done. So from that point on, it was like, okay, the Adventure Club collab, although it wasn't finished, because at the same time, like I lost the project midway in the pandemic because my hard drives failed.
Oh my God.
I got so lucky with that. They sent me the stems that they had initially sent. I rewrote the entire thing by ear just by re-listening to a render I had done, and I even made it better than the original version, in my opinion.
Fantastic.
So praise the Lords that, you know, somebody had something saved there. But at that point, you know, Dream Chaser comes along, and I'm like, okay, this is an insane song. So I get Rajan and Saren, who at this point are my interns at the studio.
And who are right here, by the way.
Yeah, they're right behind the camera. So they, you know, they come to the studio. I show them the song, and then, you know, we're talking a little bit, and then Saren, you know, looks at me and he goes, dude, that intro, like the piano, it's so sick. And I think to myself, like, it is sick. And he's like, it's so emotional. I'm like, you're right. And I think, I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I've got these other like whips that are started, and I'm like, hold on a second. And I open another track up, and I start laying down the same format for the intro, just like really emotional piano, emotional strings, and then just building this whole story around it. And all of a sudden, I'm listening to Hollow World, like pretty much done. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, I just did it again. What is going on? So at that point, I'm like, I'm almost panicking, right? Because I'm thinking to myself, like, what do I do with this? This isn't TenGraphs at all. So I send it out to a few really influential people in the industry, and they're like, yo, this is sick. Like, this is a really cool new direction for you. And somebody said, like, so are you going to start a new project with this? And I hadn't given any thought to that since writing Dream Chaser, or even since the Adventure Club collab. So I kind of just sat there and went like, why wouldn't I? You know, why wouldn't I just, you know, try it out? And brainstormed it with the team, started adding more people into the team at that point, and just went for it. And from there, like, here we are, like 4 or 5 months later. And now, like, the whole album's done. We just played El Sonic. The reaction was
insane. It just happened. You know, that's the crazy thing, is like, I didn't force any of this, and it just happened.
It's naturally come together.
Yeah. And it feels natural too. That's my biggest like takeaway from all this, is it's the most natural I've felt. Even though I've always been really like in tune with my own musicality, this is the most natural it's ever been. It's every influence of every genre I've listened to throughout the years, or I've ever produced throughout the years, crammed up into a single project.
It's a special thing to have stumbled across that kind of creativity and inspiration at that point, having already essentially done a whole project, you know?
Yeah. And the big thing in my case is this, because for me to come up with these like crazy storytelling ideas and these entire universes is, I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm huge into fantasy. I'm huge into video games. So coming up with the core concept of something is easy, but then laying down the groundwork to make it make sense is what was always the hardest, because that's the part that takes the most it's consistent daily work, and that's something I used to be really bad at. And with this project, I didn't want to let that be an issue. And I kind of doubled down on being extremely disciplined about it and working hard, but not burning myself out. So taking moments, like I think I spent like 3 weeks in the middle of that whole sequence, just not listening to music and not writing anything and just inspiring as much as I could to then be able to double down and just go back to writing. I literally waited until I think 6 days before the album was due for distribution to get the album wrapped up. Before then, we had like 4 of the songs were done. No, 3 of the songs were done, and 7 were like in progress. And I like finished all 7 in a matter of like 5-6 days.
Amazing, yeah.
You know, but that was the whole thing, is like, because I have this entire universe of a vision in front of me, it's a lot easier for me to tell that story when I've made it make sense every day since that initial like brainstorm.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, I mean, that's quite that, you know, that there was a lot that you just said there, but that it still seems like quite a relatively brief mapping out of everything that you've kind of been through over the years. So if we can go back a bit and dig a little deeper with those earlier parts in particular, in those earlier moments when you were younger and things were particularly rough, did you have any constants in terms of people beyond your family in your life that you could talk to about all these problems you were having?
Not really. I had a few kids at school that I could, you know, talk to somewhat. Because they were like in similar situations as I was, but for the most part, I didn't really have many friends. Until I was like 16, I had maybe like 2 or 3 friends that were like somewhat close to me, but still would make fun of me nonetheless. So it was hard. It was kind of hard because, you know, I couldn't even turn to my parents at that time, actually. Because my family situation was just fucked up. My parents were going through a really like fucked up divorce. My brothers were just, it was all over the place. My brothers were basically just as, you know, troublemakers as I was at that point, because our parents are so preoccupied by each other and the shit that they were putting themselves through that the way we were like perceiving our environment was so toxic. And it really didn't help that, you know, going through teenagehood is already hard enough on its own. Like having that added stressor, plus all the previous trauma and all the previous stressors it was a lot. And, you know, both my brothers didn't react as drastically as I did. I guess maybe because they saw me doing it, but I went full 180. I went from like, okay, well, you know, I'm a well-off kid from the suburbs. Fuck it. I'm just going to go and, you know, sell drugs and shit and be a complete degenerate. And that led me into some really bad places, met some really bad people, did some really bad things. And I spent years paying for that.
Was there a particularly low point that you can remember, or maybe it's several, and what do they look like?
There's a few. I think the first one was really fucked up. So the first one, I owed money for drugs to this one guy, and he broke into my apartment, stole my computer. So at that time, like, I'd lost all my projects, all my stuff. He like took all the studio gear I had, and at that point I was doing maybe 15 speeds a day, doing like an 8 ball of coke a day.
How old are you at this point?
18. And he beat the living fuck out of me also. That's the other thing. Left me with 8 microfractures to the eye. And that was the first low point. I sat on my kitchen counter for, I want to say, I can't even remember, but it felt like days, to be honest. And I just kept listening to the same songs and just crying because I didn't know what to do anymore. Because at that point I was like, actually there's another low point before that, but I'll come back to it. At that point I was so scared of living, but so scared of dying that I just like, it was easier for me to just stay right there and not do anything. And then before that, I was like 16. That was my first wake up call, was when I was 16. I tried to commit suicide by jumping in front of the subway. And this homeless guy caught me by the collar as I was walking up. I'm assuming he saw me coming a mile away because, like, it was probably pretty clear on my face what I was there for. And he pulled me back as I was like jumping in front of the subway, and he just sat me on the bench. And he was like, "You're gonna sit there, and you're not gonna move until we're done talking." And I sat there for 4 hours. We talked for like 4 hours at least. And he he gave me his life story. And he was telling me, how he lost his family, he lost his home, he lost his job, he lost his kids. And then he looks at me at some point and he says, "If I don't have a reason to do it, why the hell would you?" And this guy's homeless at that point, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, how am I going to do something like that if this guy who's been through all of this shit is not even like considering it, right? So
Which isn't to dumb down what you went through, obviously.
No, of course, because everybody's like pain threshold is different and all that. But in my case, that was like a big wake up call. It was like, okay, well, maybe I can push through this, right? So the second time was that time where when I was 18, and then the third time was right before I went to rehab. Right before I met Sven, actually.
A few years later, or just?
I was 21. I had just turned 21. So that year, a lot of things happened. So that year, I was homeless. Then Baron OD'd. Baron OD'd, and that hit really hard because we had talked about opioid abuse before. And the last like information that I had was that he was doing good. And then maybe like a month later, I was doing God knows how many amounts of drugs. And then I OD'd on heroin for the first time. And then at that point I was so low, I walked out of the hospital and just went right back and OD'd a second time. And then I realized, like, holy shit, like I gotta fix myself. I'm gonna die if I don't do something. And then like the next morning or the day after that, like a day or two later, was when Sven was coming to Montreal to play the first drop-in bass. And he said like, hey, like, we're going to talk when I get there and like blah, blah, blah. And it like, I don't know what it was, but I called my therapist and I was like, look, I really need help. Like I need to get into a rehab center like ASAP. And like they had room like the next day basically. And I said, well, can it be the day after the show? And she was like, yeah, but you shouldn't wait, in your situation. And I was like, I am like fervent in my belief that I can make it until then. I really want to meet this person. And so I made it to the show, met Sven, spoke with Sven. The next morning I was driving off to rehab. And that was single-handedly the best decision I've ever taken in my life. Because I would not be here talking to you right now. And it's crazy because since then there hasn't, like, there's nothing that I can say of my last 7 years of sobriety that would even come close to those moments at all.
Well, I mean, we're all extremely grateful that you are here and doing what you're doing and being you and everything that comes with that. So it's an amazing thing that you got through all of that. I was interested as to whether, beyond Sven, whether you had a particular moment where you knew what a trustworthy person kind of looked like, because it seems like beforehand potentially you didn't really have that kind of person in your life. But was there either a person or a moment where you instantly just put your trust in that individual?
So I think in July, I want to say it's July 2015, right before or right as I was homeless. Can't remember exactly what the timeline was. I was so deep in drugs at that point. But I met Lord Swanix before meeting Sven, and that was the first time that I was able to speak to somebody that I listened to their music and I looked up to them, and we hung out all weekend, and it was the first time I genuinely felt like I had a friend that I could just like talk about something with and not feel judged about it. We talked about music pretty much that whole weekend, and it was fun. It was just like a fun weekend, like minus all the shit that I did, but like those moments were really important moments because they gave me a sense of like I can maybe trust this person. And then meeting Sven a few months later, it was like, this is my family. This is the only people that I can talk to without feeling like an alien about. Like it was weird because I've known them since 2013, and it's just crazy to me that like we're here now, and it's like, I don't know, meeting them after having talked to them for so long was just crazy. It was just crazy.
So I think at this point, off the back of what you've just said, people will be quite interested as to where exactly the electronic production comes in, because you had the upbringing with the choir, which you touched on. So music, I think, has clearly always been quite a big part of your life. So people might also want to know, I suppose, how you, given what you went through, how you had the means to get the stuff to make the music, and just how did it all start on that front?
Um, there's a lot of components to that. I think the first thing is, I grew up with parents that were really well versed in multiple genres of music. I had family and friends, help me discover a bunch of genres throughout the years. And I got almost addicted to finding genres and discovering what a good song from those genres was. And I think my earliest discoveries of electronic music was drum and bass. I was about, I want to say 13, 14 when I really got into it. And then also house and electro was like my really early influences. And then I found dubstep, I think through like a breaks tune or something, like 2009.
Often the way.
And 2008 or 2009, I can't remember, something like that. It was right before, actually no, it was earlier than that. It was right before, like, I found Excision through a few other things, didn't think anything of it, but it was right before Skrillex put out the My Name is Skrillex EP, which I can't even remember what year that was. I want to say it's like 2009.
Yeah, I think 2009, yeah.
So that's when I discovered like the early dubstep stuff. And I immediately dove in because at the time I was still smoking weed. I was still like really into like, just parties and casually drinking with friends. And dubstep was like that chill space that we could all like fall into. And I think from there, when I discovered Excision and Skrillex first, I think Scata from Skrillex and Subsonic from Excision really helped me like discover my passion for heavy, angry music. And then that just opened up a whole universe. Guys like Loop Stepwalker, Balkan Sky, really early day Mantis. That really set the pace for everything else after that.
And
Um,
just quickly, I
mhm,
mean, what was it that, because you had the rock and the metal that you enjoyed a lot as
mhm.
well. So what was it about that separated it from that
Um,
enjoyment?
I think that's the thing. I don't think it separates it as much as it's like it was a it was another medium that gave me the same level of intensity. And at the time I was listening to a lot of like deathcore, hardcore, um, and finding those similarities in intensity um, through an electronic genre was like revealing to me at the time. And then I immediately, I dove into two directions with that. I dove into the really like dark, aggressive dubstep really early on. That's how I figured out, who Sven was. Is I discovered him through the Static Reset project, which was I don't even know how old at this point. Feels like forever ago, but that was a long time ago. Um, and also I started getting into like the really like more aggressive, like almost hardcore crossbreed type drum and bass guys like Counter Strike, Forbidden Society. And I played that out for years. I was more into drum and bass at the time and like hardcore and all that than I was into dubstep because no dubstep producers except Sven and Mantis were putting out that level of quality. And so even when I booked Mantis in Montreal, I didn't play any dubstep. I played like crossbreed and stuff. Um, and that was the first time, actually, come to think of it, it was like early 2013. And that was the first time that I saw an electronic music artist call a wall of death and see an entire venue split in half. This is, and to put it into perspective, this is an era where warehouse raves were still really big in Canada, and nobody was really like moshing or anything like that. But that show, like Apache was there. It was a huge show for, like, the names that were on that bill were really big for where we are today in the industry. Um, but at the time, Apache was the local in Montreal. But the sheer magnitude of seeing like 1,000 people split in half and just run into each other in 2013 was unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was a really revealing moment for me to see that it works. And I mean, minus all the crap that happened with that show, I had a shotgun down my throat because I had to borrow money because at the last minute one of the promoters ran off with some money. And then everybody thought that I ran off with the money because my parents were like, "Hey, like you're not doing too good. Maybe you should come on a trip with us." You know, idiot that I was at the time, I didn't know better. I was such an innocent kid back then. I said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to Cancun for the week with mom and dad." But like everybody thought I just ran off with the money to go to Cancun. Like,
Right.
okay, yeah, sure.
Mm.
Like that was gonna happen. So I came back from that trip with a clear head of like, okay, I've got to pay all these people back now. So I spent like all of 2013 basically working 3 kitchen jobs, just washing dishes,
Right.
just to pay everybody off. Um, and then from there, like I kept those jobs and I bought myself some gear again because my gear got stolen through that process. Um, and yeah, no, that was a really like big opener for me of like, holy shit, like heavy music works. And then everybody who had told me at the time, because all the major promoters were like, "Oh, you're only gonna get like 300 people at your show," blah blah. I fucking sold out. I fucking sold out. Like there was so many people there we couldn't even count heads.
That's
That was my
amazing.
first ever show I ever threw.
Mm.
Fucking sold out.
Wow.
And that's when I knew, like this genre works.
Mm.
People like aggressive music. And then, fast forward a little bit, Trollface, Getter, all these guys were getting booked at that point in Montreal. Midnight Tea, all those guys. And that really fast forwarded Montreal's appreciation for rhythm, Montreal's appreciation for heavy music, so on and so forth. So that by the time, I walked into rehab and Sven came along and all that, um, the staple of Montreal at that point was like, we go hard, and I want to say like I'm the one who stemmed that
Mm.
because of that one show. As much of a shit show as it was, like I've said this a million times over, like I completely did not manage that show properly. I did not know what I was doing. We were 3 guys managing a show that should have taken a team of like 12. at least.
Mm.
It was a shit show. But it was fun. Like, all things said and done, like we were literally, we got sound in at 6 p.m. because we couldn't pay them before that. And we were painting decorations 5 minutes before doors opened.
Wow.
That's how much of a shit show it was. But it really led to me like going like, holy shit, this music works. And then I wanted to learn how to do it. So I started learning how to produce drum and bass. Then I started learning how to produce like the really like distorted, aggressive dubstep. And just one thing led to another. Talking to guys like Sven, guys like Lord Swanex. It just led to this understanding of musical production on the electronic side of things that made it easier and easier for me to develop my own sound. And then during that time, I was like first year of sobriety, like early 2016. I was hanging out with Crimer a lot because he was a local from Montreal, and we were sitting down one day, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like this is how I approach writing dubstep." And nobody had ever done that with me before, like showed me like their thought process of writing a dubstep song. And the first time I applied that, was on a Midnight Tea remix that won the remix competition he was doing at the time. And that opened the world to the entire Ripping Faces sound.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the time, we had just released Sudden Death, one of Sudden Death's first tunes on Crow's Nest. We'd been releasing some Cram. We'd been releasing like a few other names. And so I just said like, okay, well, I want to like learn from all of these guys. And so I just collaborated with all of them and then did a single. And that's how the Ripping Faces EP came along. And that was like a really like defining moment for the project, because I was like, okay, now I've got this cool sound. I've got this cool EP going on. Let me brand it. And I took a shot at branding it. And that's how I came up with the mask. It's how I got the mask done professionally by a mask maker that does post effects for cinema. Cost me an arm and a leg.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, especially because I didn't have that kind of money. And then I just put everything I had into that one EP, and we shot a music video, as corny as it was, and it popped off. And at the time, like, socials were just craving that type of stuff, so it really went big. Cue in a UKF interview, cue in a bunch of like first shows in Paris, first shows in the US, and this and that. It just for 3 years it was just rolling. But yeah, that's how it happened.
And so, what was then the most challenging part? I suppose, when you're learning the music and how to make it, that in itself is difficult, actually making it good.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, I mean, you can talk about that as well. I do want to hear about that. But beyond that, what is for you, from your own personal experience, the most difficult thing when you are starting out in that industry? And has your mind on that changed over time, would you say?
I would say part of it has changed. So my mouth is dry. So one of the big things that I've always been about is I'll never watch a tutorial to learn about, how to make a sound or how to do this. It's never the how that bothers me. It's the why. So if I find out what the why of something is, like, why does this do this? Why does this do that? Why am I choosing to do this process in this order? If I get that answer, then I'm gaining benefit from it. But I don't do that often. I won't usually go out of my way to watch a YouTube tutorial to learn how to do a specific technique. Most of what I do is like avoid it almost. So what makes it hard is everybody has these like, standardized techniques now that I try to run away from. I can reverse engineer it, but I try to stay away from it because it's that similar to everybody else.
Right.
So that makes it that it's harder to, to position a sound, especially a sound that's already niche, in a setting where everybody just is so used to hearing the same tone, right? So that was a big thing that's always been important to me, but that's also been really hard to push through. What has changed over time is, at the time, I used to think, at least, that like, oh, you can only do so much before you have to like commit to making something that works for the crowd and works for this. And now it's entirely different. Now there's this, I almost want to call it meta of how I work, where the only thing that matters is the story. Everything else about the music is entirely secondary to what is the story about? What am I trying to say? And then I figure out what that is. I put it into either, images or words or whatever it is. And then I try and break down what the musical tone of that feels like. So with Dream Chaser, for example, it's weird because with Dream Chaser, it's just my kid was right behind me, and that was very easy. It's like, what do I feel? Like, I feel like I've let go of all this anger, all this negativity, and I'm just happy to be alive. I'm just happy to be able to keep doing these things that I'm doing. So that was very simple. Like all of these like really happy sounds, these pianos, the chords, the choirs, the arps. As much as it's like a straight like dubstep banger, there's also meaning to it because I'm able to express through the specific sounds that need to be used to tell those emotions. It's easier for me to pull those out. So that's a process that like I've always experimented with, but now I feel like I've honed in on what it feels like for me. And it's something I don't necessarily see that many people doing to that degree of like, I print out images or save images and just look at a whole mood board and go, this gives me horn vibes. This gives me string vibes. This gives me, like super distorted respace vibes. There's every image has a sound. Every sound has an image. There's all this like dynamic of like one medium translates an emotion that can be expressed through a different medium, so on and so forth. But I've really tapped into that over the last couple of years.
So if we're talking about giving advice to people who are starting out and who are at that point now where you were, is story that important thing? Is that the thing that you have to nail, like in your opinion, from your experience, is that the thing that you nail down?
So it's funny because I've been teaching for 5 years and I used to teach just straight up production. People used to come to me like, hey, I want you to teach me how to produce. Your mix downs are super sick. Your sound design's sick. And at the time I was like, yeah, that's cool. I can teach you how to do that. But it always felt weird to me when I would hear songs with really good mix downs, really good sound design, but I would just not listen to them. I listened to them once and then it's gone. And when I really pinned down my teaching methods and really like honed in on like, what am I trying to teach and how am I trying to teach it? It just kept coming back to, you need to be telling a story. You need to be able to brand and market that story. You need to be able to stay disciplined in executing the story. So the way I teach has shifted in that sense. And it's also the way I give advice is it doesn't matter if the mix down isn't great. It has to be decent. Let's put things in perspective. Same thing with sound design. You do need good sounds. You don't necessarily need to be the outlier. Not everybody needs to be Noisia here.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like even if you take guys like Noisia, yes, their technical execution is huge. But the thing they care the most about is the arrangement. Does the sound make sense where it is? Does it serve a specific purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had conversations with them about that before. So to hear them say it in such a concise manner, it's like, okay, well, I'm definitely not crazy because I'm nowhere near their level. I'll never be. But if they're the ones saying it, it just confirms what I feel, which is at the end of the day, the way you write and arrange the story matters more than the specific words you use.
Mm.
And in the same sense, through music, like it doesn't matter which synth you're using. It doesn't even matter what sound comes out of that synth. It matters where that sound is going.
Sure.
And what it's trying to tell. And I think that I've taught hundreds of people this over the past 5 years. I've had over 400 plus students. The few students who've listened to me like A to Z on that topic, Ragin being one of them that really like stood out from the lot, have immediately found their sound, executed their sound, and thrived in their sound. Far faster and far more than any other artist in their categories. And it's not even necessarily the hardest thing to achieve. It's just rewiring your brain to think differently, especially if you come from a world where, for example, sound design and mixdown is glorified as being the most important thing. But you look at guys like, Flux Pavilion in the early days when he released his Cracks remix. That song's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. That song is just never going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Why?
Iconic.
because it's just a solid song from a storytelling perspective. Crave You by Adventure Club is the same example. Skrillex Cinema Remix, same example. Scary Monsters and Nice Price. Like, those songs will not go anywhere. They tell a story. And I think another great example of that is you look at any artist who writes a song that is sound design focused, and then you go listen to another song from them that is story focused. Pay attention to how much more focus they put on the technical side of things when they don't have anything to say versus when they do.
Mm.
And when they do, usually they try to avoid being overly technical because you lack that human aspect of like the imperfection that's in it. Right? Remember, viewers wouldn't be able to know this, but we were in the car the other day and I was mentioning how I love Zomboy's music, but it's too clean. Right? And I say this with all the respect in the world. Like, I love how clean it is. But what it's missing, and not every track, some of the tracks it's there, but what it's missing in some of those tracks is there's no story. And I'm picking Zomboy as like an example of like, it happens at every level. It happens to all of us, even me. Like, even the album, there's bound to be some songs where like the story did not translate as well.
Are you talking recently or just
throughout the discography, right? It like I said, like, it doesn't happen on every song, but there's some songs where like it's an amazing song. It's very clean, it's very well written, but the story doesn't translate as well. And I think that's where a lot of people go like, "Oh, but I like this song so much. Why didn't it do as well?" Probably because the story wasn't as in depth or as well executed. The listener has to feel the emotion you're trying to portray through the medium, right? So if they don't feel it because it's not entirely like fleshed out, then it won't connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way where I keep telling people, stop teasing your music if you don't have enough fans to tease it to. It makes no sense to spend a month talking about a release you're about to release because people are just not even seeing it. So the few times you do get somebody's attention, and this isn't me saying this is like, guys that worked at majors and consulted for major labels like Sony and Universal and all them. The biggest thing that I've noticed is every time a small artist has a moment of attention, it's never about their music because they spent so long hyping it up that only the hype post gets the attention. And so that makes it where they go like, oh, well, maybe my music's not that good. No, it's just you marketed it upside down. Just put the music out, then let people go back to the music after telling the story of that song. That's what we did with the Altair project, and we had one song. 2 weeks later, we were playing Il Sonic, and like the whole crowd knew it. 4,000 plus people knew the song. That's more than the amount of plays we had on like first week.
Yeah.
Because people had already seen like the videos, they had seen all like the content around it, but the song was already there. So they could just go back to it. And I think that's a very important thing is like the story when we're talking about the music, it extends to everything else around you. Like even what I'm talking about right now, it's part of my story. Like my story translates through my own music. I need to be able to talk about it. If you're just writing music to write bangers, where's that going to lead?
Right.
It's going to last for a bit, but it's not going to be here in 10 years.
Sure. The aim is, I suppose, always should be, well, not should be, but making timeless music is just where it's at, and this is all very valuable stuff that you're mentioning here. If we are, obviously Altair is the new thing. If we are stepping back just slightly with TenGraphs being a thing that was part of your progression in terms of where you are now, what is the TenGraphs story? What is it that you hope people got out of that, with that having now being a part of the past for you?
So I think a big part of what TenGraphs is so the way the story lays itself out from a lore perspective. I'll start there. Is the original Ripper is a being that is filled with a bunch of negative personality traits, things like lust, things like ego, things like um sadism, like all of these like really like negative, like rage, all these negative emotions and whatnot. And I think that was just me fleshing out what all of those negative things inside me looked like, and from there just putting it into this nice little package and showing people what that looked like. So that's all the way from Ripping Faces into Cult of the Rippers LP. And then the LP trails into a little bit more of the lore where the original Rippers separates all of those emotions and starts naming them. So that's the part where I start learning how to, name what my own issues are, right? So the Ghoul King represented rage. What would have been the Crypt Keeper would have represented the need for control. The Butcher would have been sadism. The Black Maiden would have been lust. And the Prophet would have been ego. And so through all of that, that storyline was going to lead into something else that was going to turn out to be more positive. With COVID and how, live shows got affected and all of that, it just didn't make sense to release the music without the live experience that we had planned. So we just kind of, put it all aside, waited a couple years, and it didn't feel right. It just didn't work the same. So by the time I sat down and really worked on, okay, I want to write, my own music again, the TenGraphs project didn't make sense per se, but that was still how the story had to be told. And that's what the overall story needed to look like.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And so, that's bound up in quite a lot of dark imagery and material.
Mm-hmm.
How, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the beginning of that project very much intertwined with the drug experiences and just use that you were going through in your life? How kind of intertwined do you think those things are, and how much of that music came from those experiences, would you say?
I'd say the music itself was just always a passion for me, like the type of music, but the expression of it, the stories that they would tell were very much stories of my own drug use, my own addiction, my own negative emotions that I was going through at the time and that I was trying to release. So like the first, 5 years of being sober was me just trying to get all of that negative out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the project really bloomed, was here's all these negative emotions, guys. Hope you can relate. And it worked. It really worked. Like a lot of people were able to relate to that, at least to a certain extent, where they could feel that darkness. They could feel that sheer, horror aspect, because that's what it felt like to me. There were moments where I was just sitting there like, I don't even know how to fix this. I don't know how to address this problem. And showing that magnitude of like there is no escaping it was very important, and I think I did a pretty good job of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. You've touched on ego a couple of times already.
Yeah.
Mentioned it a couple of times, and I want to know, I'm keen to understand what that looks like for you and how much of a part that was, because you've been frank with me in the last couple of days that I've spent this time with you, and you've said that, yeah, there was a persona that went with being this alias, being this artist, whether it be online. I don't know so much as in person, but we all know that you piped up a couple of times on Twitter. We all know.
Oh,
that.
yeah.
The Calvin Harris thing, like we all know about that. So,
yep.
would you mind, we can start with going back over that tweet and then kind of going from there. And
so that tweet is
it was a moment in time. Like let's be honest.
It's a very clear expression of who I am, though. And it's a really good starting point, I think. So the thing about that tweet is I'm the type of person that will rush to the people I care about's defense on even the smallest of things. I will do the same thing for people that I consider are the underdogs because I've been there my whole life. So anything that has to do with, violence, with sexual assault, with, homophobia, racism, I've made my mistakes as a human being. Like I wasn't brought up necessarily perfect, but I've learned from that. And I've taken a very important I don't want to call it a mission because it's not much a mission. It's just I deeply care about people that are vulnerable because I was vulnerable and I know what that feels like. And I sincerely believe that nobody should feel or go through the things that I went through or similar types of things. And so whenever I see any form of injustice, that really just triggers me right away. So seeing something like, the Calvin Harris incident where I see Apache, who's a close friend, have his entire project just, ripped apart and like copy pasted by a major artist like that. I was like, okay, well, one of two things. Either John is like, actually like offended by this, or it's just a, okay, let's, talk about it and see what's up and then figure out, where it goes from there. But immediately, this is the part where I was really annoyed by. It's like immediately he acted like he knew what he was talking about and was better than everybody else. And that really gets to me. That, like, as somebody who is also like that very much to a certain extent, it was that first thing of like, I'm being mirrored, but in a very negative, unhealthy way. So I triggered like right away. I was like, okay, well, let's go factual then. Let's break down the cinematographic portions of why you copied it. And he didn't like that. So he reacted. And so I said, okay, well, now at this point, like, if he's going to full on insult me on the internet, because I knew he was insulting me. Like, I'm not stupid. I knew he was insulting the entire genre. But I made it a thing. I turned it into this whole thing because at this point, it's like, okay, well, let's just get press out of it. Because if he's not going to admit to it after all the shit that, like, the actual rational stuff that I presented to him, well, fuck him. He's just another guy. That's how I see it. It's like, I don't care who he is. I don't care who anybody is, really. It's like, at the end of the day, we're all just human beings. If I see you in the street, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter what you've done. You're just another person. So to me, it's like, I'll take you on. That was the wildest.
So just to spell it out, he called him. Anyone here know?
Yeah, not. He said, away back to your Nazi headbanger music, you wee pleb. In that specific order, I
wee
can
pleb.
verbatim that.
Yo wee pleb.
Yo wee pleb.
I'm going Scottish.
The Scot in him came right up from that one. And like, again, I get where he comes from. He's probably annoyed because he probably gets that type of commentary all the time. But like, in this specific instance, it's like, you're wrong and you're pissed that you're proven wrong. Just, fucking take the L, bro.
Can you remember exactly how you felt when you read that tweet for the first time?
It was weird, right? So, because before that, we were just like, what the fuck? Like, why'd he do that? But as soon as he posted that, I was like, that's a direct attack. And he's like, he didn't think that tweet through at all. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? Like, fuck the guy. If he's going to be like an asshole and insult people on the internet like that, fuck it. So I basically just started tweeting like, guys, look at what Calvin Harris thinks of dubstep. And so that got crazy reactions. And I mean, that, of course it's sensationalism. Like, I'm not stupid. I'm not, I love marketing. I'm totally going to use things like that to my advantage, but not in a way that's going to be detrimental to them, right? So that's another big thing, is like, I'm only ever going to do that when it's towards people that are extremely unfair towards the underdog. That's a big rule for me. So in that specific case, but also in multiple others that I could mention, and that I have mentioned to you outside of the interview, it's one of those situations where, like, just fuck you at that point. If you're going to be such an asshole about what you did. And again, nobody's perfect, but like, don't be an asshole on the internet when you get called out for doing something dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to be like that. That's the problem. It's like, I used to be like that. I used to defend my point till there was no end, rather than just go like, yeah, no, you know what? Maybe you're right. But being told that so many times and being proven wrong so many times led to me and being like, developing that level of arrogance. When I got to rehab, that led me to like, okay, now I actually want to go back and like research all these things. And I'm already like really big on researching. I've read thousands of books in my lifetime. As a kid, that's all I had that was like satisfying and fulfilling to me,
Mm.
right? I would just read books all night long or even in school instead of attending class. So I have a lot of like common but also somewhat advanced knowledge on a lot of different topics. But now it was like, okay, well now I don't want to feel like that. So then that led into this different kind of ego that was more focused towards knowledge, right? Like I know things and I can teach them to you. And then for a while, like that felt really weird. And then now I don't want that anymore. I just want to be in my own space, do my own thing, and that's it. Like if you want my help, I'll help. But like if you don't ask, I won't bother.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just mention it passingly. I'll be like, yeah, you know what, you're wrong, and here's why, and then just move on and not even bother with the response. Because I've done it. It was fun. Like I do get enjoyment out of Twitter banter amongst other things. But I just don't have time anymore. You know, I have a kid now. I have, you know, people around me that I actually genuinely love and care about. And it's just, I
Feels
don't
great.
need it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't need it. You know, it's liberating. And that's a big thing about ego is like, I had one. I needed to have one. It was a survival mechanism. But I let it grow for too long. And by the time I realized it, you know, it was pretty bad. Not gonna lie, it was pretty bad. But I got it in check and I said, you know what, let's figure this shit out. And then just started actually, you know, practicing what I preached and just said, fuck it. I'm not gonna bother with this shit no more.
So that sense of ego doesn't carry on at all, you wouldn't say, into what you're doing now, or do you plan to still have a little bit of that cheekiness with the Altair project? Like how much does it exist in your life right now?
I mean, I'm never not gonna be a little bit cheeky. It's part of who I am. I like it. It's humorous when it's done right. I think the big difference now is I don't feel the need to fight anymore. I'll just like mention things and be like, well, you know, this is what I see, and then just move on. A great example is the video I did for Ilsonic about St. Lambert. You know, I did a vox pop in St. Lambert, asked a bunch of people their thoughts on St. Lambert, you know, getting the noise limits reduced for Ilsonic, and just, you know, posted the video. I gave both ends of the spectrum, and like, you know, some people think this, some people think that. Here's the funniest moments. Enjoy. On both ends. Like some of the funny moments were like entirely against Ilsonic and some of them were entirely for. And it was just fun. I think that's my thing now is I've realized like there's so many more important things in life than fighting for something when I can be building something.
Mm.
And now that's the space that I'm in is I just want to create and I want to build these like ideas and concepts up as much as I can and destroy these old habits. And basically like that's where the whole like create, destroy, transform came from. Is my whole journey is a journey of transformation from one extreme to the other. And my goal is to hit that other extreme of like I am able to be a very positive influence, a very positive human being when I want to, but I want to make that the focus now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about doing it when it's important or when it's, you know, to save somebody's life. Saying I want to do this all the time because that's why I'm still here. Like the reason why I'm still alive is because I started, you know, looking at things in a positive way and being a positive person. I want that to be a daily thing. And so to do that, I really had to re-engineer how I was thinking, how I was perceiving things. And having a kid really makes it easier. To be honest, like looking at the world through a child's eyes is just it's special, right? Because you see them discovering the things you've taken for granted your whole life and just going like, wow, that is special. And I'm already somebody who does, you know, I wake up grateful every morning. I do like an actual list of everything I'm grateful for, and I repeat it to myself a few times throughout the day. But that's really something where now it's even more important because it's not just about me.
Mm.
And I think translating that thought process into my professional life really makes a big difference.
Amazing, yeah. I mean, how old is he now?
He's 8 months now.
What do you think through having that experience, obviously it's a very young one so far, but what do you think you've learned about yourself through that? Big question, but
I think the biggest thing that I've learned from being a father was that I can be a father. That's I didn't want kids up until like 2 years ago. And a big part of it was I didn't want to make the same mistakes my parents did. I didn't think I was good enough. There were all these components. But the biggest one was I was afraid I wasn't going to be enough. And I think giving myself the chance to be a dad taught me to be a dad. And that translated into everything else. It's like, I might not be good enough at something, but if I give myself the chance to try it, I might be good. And that's really been a big thing. It's like throughout this entire process, a lot of what I'm doing right now is based off of that principle of I might not know what the fuck I'm doing, but let's try it out anyways. Yeah, let's see where this leads. I did the same thing with singing when I met my fiance, because everybody before then, even my ex, was telling me like, you don't know how to sing. My fiance looked at me and says, no, you just don't know how. You've never been taught. You've never really taken classes for it. Just, practice. Just try it. And I was like, huh. That started all the gears slowly but surely. And by the time, my son's born, it's like, wow, okay, no, I really get what that means now. That the whole like 10,000 hour rule, it's just a number, but like the concept is you got to try stuff if you want to be able to do things. Otherwise, you're just going to sit there and not be able to do them. That's what it comes down to.
And you've mentioned briefly there, Jen, your
Mm-hmm.
fiance, had the pleasure of staying with her and yourself the last few days. How has she helped you progress and through, not only through life but through your music as well, and just everything I suppose that you're going through yourself, but together as well?
I think if it wasn't for Jen, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I owe so much to that girl for so many reasons. As an individual, she's probably pushed me more than anybody else has ever pushed me in my life. I've learned so much from that girl that has shaped who I am today and helped me become the person that I am. As a professional, she's given me the confidence of being who I am. As a person too, but especially as a professional. As a father, like I said previously. But even just overall in our relationship, she's really helped me achieve a level of myself that I didn't think was possible. So I look at myself in the mirror now, and I mean, first off about that is it took me 10 years of repeating to myself that I love myself in the mirror before believing in it. Let's start there. And from that point, Jen taught me to visualize the ideal version of myself and go for it and actually chase it. So when I met her, like I hadn't touched tattoos in years. I hadn't done any tattoos in years. And she's like, no, you should get tattooed. Like, you might not have a lot of money left, but like go for it. And it's like, okay, let's start getting tattooed. And that was like that first thing of like, okay, let's finish all these projects we have. I started doing my nails because at the time I was chewing my nails so much that like my hands were bleeding all the time. And I would look at my hands and be like, oh my God, my hands look ugly. And then she's like, well, let's just do your nails. I was like, yeah, I'm not sure. Just try it once. Here we are, like, almost a year and a half later, and I get my nails done by her like every week now. I had never dyed my hair or bleached my hair in my life. She's like, yeah, you should try bleach your hair. Okay, let's try
Small
it
things
out.
that make a massive difference.
I never thought that I would like look at myself and go like, yeah, I want silver hair. But like now I wouldn't see myself a day without it. It's little things. So it's a big role that she's played throughout these last 5 years of being together, where my own self-love has drastically improved, even though it was already at a really solid point. It's gotten to a point where my confidence has dramatically evolved to a point where I used to still do certain things to please other people. Now I really couldn't give a fuck. People can say whatever they want, do whatever they want. Now it's just like, man, I have a kid, I have a wife, I don't care. I don't have time for any of this. I have people that depend on me and I depend on them. And if you're not one of those people, your opinion does not matter to me, whether it's good or bad. Obviously, I appreciate the good ones and I respect the negative criticism, but it's like, it's not important. Like, it doesn't affect me. And I think that's something that takes most people like a lot of time and a lot of like life experience to get to. And it's not easy because we all have that sense of, how can I put it? We all want to please. It's part of human nature. We all have this, desire to belong somewhere. But when you get close enough to that point of belonging to yourself first and foremost, before belonging to these other relationships you've developed, everything else kind of just feels different. Because then it becomes a relationship with yourself before anything. And it's like, am I respecting what I believe in? Am I respecting what I want to do? Am I respecting, and not in a selfish way, but in a very self-aware kind of way, where I need to be aware of my own limits. I need to be aware of my own boundaries. I need to be aware of all these things that make me who I am. And if I go against those things, then I'm going against myself. And that's why I don't feel good if I do those things. And I think a lot of people spend a lot of their lives going against themselves instead of just being. And that's what the being yourself really represents is, who are you? Ask yourself the question every day and then just roll with it. Be that and nothing less and nothing more. And then just, it'll come. It might take a few years. For me, it took a long ass time. But it just sort of kicks in at some point.
So you realize that, I imagine, in the middle of the TenGraphs project.
Oh, way later than that.
Later, okay.
This was like a few months ago.
Right, okay.
This was months ago. Yeah, no, this is very recent.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like there's a progression through and through. It's not just like black on white.
Started probably
but
during that.
Yeah, but it's definitely grown a lot over the last, I want to say, year and a half at this point. Probably like January 2021 is when it really started kicking into high gear. Where I questioned a lot of like the why I was doing the things I was doing. And I started questioning like, am I doing this for me or am I doing this to please people? Am I doing this for me or am I doing this because it respects everybody else's boundaries before mine? All these things where I wasn't just listening to myself first and then accounting for all these other variables. I would basically abstract myself, account for the variables first, and then try to fit myself into that equation. And it's like, if you build an entire puzzle and you're trying to fit one piece in, if you don't have the right piece left, it's not going to fit.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you take that first piece and you build around it, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot easier. So that's where I, figured out like how to get there. Is like, okay, if I start with, I am the first chain, and then all these other components are add-ons, how do I make it fit in a way that everything is harmonious? And it's hard. It's not easy, but it's worth the effort, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. If we can revert back to the story now a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing TenGraphs, you're sober many years in a row, everything is seemingly going very well for you. What are the bad things that you experience, if there are any, at that point in that journey, and how did they kind of reveal themselves to you? And I think in asking this, I'm asking more about maybe the music side of your life and that industry and what you realized and acknowledged the more you did that project and that music. And perhaps also off the back of that, what you can teach other people who are coming up, through that.
I think I think it's so funny because I've talked so much throughout all of this, but this one's so much simpler in my head. I think it really just comes down to we're all human beings doing the best we can with what we got. And if I had understood what that meant sooner, I would have been a lot more patient with people. I would have been a lot more understanding with people, and I wouldn't have been as aggressive to them. Um, and I also probably I would have avoided a lot of issues, but I would have also maybe not caused as many. That's the other thing too. Because a lot of, you know, there's a lot of things where like I wasn't the cause of a problem, but there's a lot of it where I was, and I think I won't call them regrets, but I know that they stem from that issue of I was being aggressive towards people or I was being impatient and I think to remember that we're all just trying to figure this shit out. It's important. You know, it's one of those like key little things where you just remember that in the back of your head every day, and you don't really ever get mad at anything after. You don't really ever get impatient after. It's like not everybody's got the same resources, not everybody's got the same life. We're all just trying to survive, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't suppose you mind if I just do a quick click of the old fingers. Should
Oh,
I do
go
it in
for
the
it.
mic or
In the
like,
in the mic,
right?
yeah.
Oh, I've been waiting to do that for about half an hour. Really get those in there. Um, what did you learn about other people? I think this is what I am.
Okay.
I've been thinking about this question quite a lot over the course of being with you this last few days because I think you don't have to name names, but I feel like you have experiences that you've gone through that have potentially maybe shaped your kind of whole view of people in general. Perhaps
So
I might
fun.
be wrong.
No, you're definitely right. So funny enough, um, I think a lot of people have this perception that if you're at the top, you're a very, you know, very like sharky negative person, and then if you're at the bottom, you're super nice and all that crap. Um, I don't think the position or the situation you have in any kind of context, whether it's the music industry or other, affects that because I've met some of the most genuine and authentic people I've ever met that are like all the way at the top of the food chain. Just like I've met people that are like, you know, they don't know anything about music, but they're still assholes. And the exact opposite as well, you know. And I think it just comes down to there's definitely some people out there that have your worst interest at heart. They do not give a shit about you. They just give a shit about what they can get from you. And on the flip side, there's people out there which more often than not come from sources that you might not expect that actually do give a shit about you. And those people, if and when you do find them, I think those people, the few that do come along, they need to be cherished because we only get a couple of those every time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we get, you know, they say keep your circle small. There's a reason. A lot of people want something from you and don't want to necessarily give to you. Um, and you know, there's been a lot of abuse in the music industry over the last 5-6 decades that it's been, you know, thriving. And I've seen a lot of horror stories. I know other people have seen a lot of horror stories. But even with that in mind, you can find your people and you can definitely make some amazing, beautiful things happen with all the respect that's due to all of those parties involved.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how much negative shit goes on.
Well, was there a particular instance or an example? Again, you don't have to name anyone in particular, but something that just set you back a bit or made you lose faith in terms of, I mean, maybe your music in particular, but also the music scene overall, the industry. Was there, was there something? Is there a moment like that for you that you've experienced or gone through?
I think there's so many names that come to mind, and I mean there's the obvious ones, you know, Datsik, Bass Nectar, Monks, uh, there's a lot of people that have made these horrible actions a thing and just completely ruined people's lives realistically. Like there's people's lives that have been affected through all this in irreparable ways, and for different reasons, for different things. There's also, like, there's label managers, there's, agencies, artist managers, promoters. There's always going to be shitty people in the world. And I think there wasn't one thing in particular. It was just this accumulation of seeing the shit that I saw throughout the rest of my life repeat itself on a professional level, and realizing, I think this is a big part for me. It's more about realizing the moment where I noticed, like, there are rules to the music industry, but nobody in electronic music wants to fucking respect them.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is simple, is they don't fucking know them because they can't use Google. But, like, that's basically what it comes down to, is like, people don't know what those rules are. And the ones that know better profit. The ones that don't, they get used. And it sucks.
Yeah, what's the tip that you give up and comers who will probably have to navigate that at some point?
You don't need a manager, and if you do, think of it like a business manager. You definitely don't need a record label. Although having a good record label with people that genuinely believe in your vision and care about you and your project is very helpful. Never sign away your masters. No, there's barely ever any circumstances that I would say that would make sense, in my opinion. Masters should just always stay in your pocket. There's no label out there, especially in dubstep, that I think is giving away the actual value for what a master is worth. No matter how big or small the song is, in reality, I just don't see it. There's a few that come to mind that are really good, like, labels like Ophelia, labels like Cannibalen. They get you sync licenses and all that. Like, that makes sense.
I think you said Deadbeats as well.
Deadbeats as well, yes. That makes sense. They actually put in the extra effort, but not every label's like that. A lot of labels just, take your money, and, they'll put a bit of money for, like, a video or something, or some Facebook ads, but, like, it doesn't benefit you. It benefits them. And I think a lot of people are afraid to do it on their own. And there's so many resources by so many much more credible sources than the people that we all, quote unquote, look up to, that confirm that you can do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it will work better than if you followed a label that didn't know what they were doing.
What do you think the scene needs more of then?
Education. Honestly, education. People just are just unaware. There's so much free, accessible knowledge that I see people either charging for or just completely, like, omitting to profit off of kids that don't know better. If there was more education, everything would run so much smoother.
Because that's been a big part of your journey as well, of course, is teaching and tutoring people.
Yeah.
To what extent is that solely production based, or like how much does the kind of the extra stuff beyond, like, the live stuff and the management stuff and everything else that comes with it, how much do you weave that in to the production stuff, which I imagine is the bulk of it?
It's actually the other way around.
Okay.
Nowadays, it used to be mainly production, but nowadays it's almost only the other stuff. The production is more like, okay, if we want to tell a specific, story, we need a specific sound. If my student doesn't know how, we'll figure out how to make that sound happen. But other than that, most of it's like storytelling, branding, marketing, business, project management, just behavioral reformatting, developing good habits, just lifestyle changes, well-being, things like that, because that's where the real impact is. If I can affect that part of their behavior, they can figure out their own level of knowledge and skill over time. That part's easy. But I got to get them disciplined. I got to get them with the right attitude about all these different things that they have to do. And I got to make them feel confident about it.
And how much has doing that helped you, would you say?
Oh my
And in
God.
what ways?
Being self-aware of those things on a daily basis has made me 1,000 times more productive than where I was 7 years ago. I would not have the work ethic I have today if I didn't understand how that formula functions.
I think we need a little Yelp review right here from Raging on the older. So what the tutoring is it? Yes, it's good. Out of 10, you're giving it a solid like 9.7 maybe, or like a 10.
Perfect 10. Let's go.
I feel like we should get Raging in at some point to like talk through what it's like
could.
working with you.
Yeah, we could.
But going back to your own work, you feel like Altair now is just would you say to what extent is it just a bit of a, I suppose, an ideal representation of where you're at as a person?
I think at this point, what I want it to do is I want it to follow where I am in the moment, and maybe it might trail like by like a couple months at the very most, just for release purposes and all that. But for the most part, it really is just going to reflect where I am, where my headspace is, where my life is going, how I feel. Like I said in the beginning, my most important reason for this project is creating some amazing things, making these like really like amazing moments happen, and destroying these like old habits and old fears that I had, and then just like telling that story of transformation in a transparent way without like any filter or nothing. Just here's what it is. Take it or leave it.
And the end goal would be.
Oh my god.
These are not things, of course. I mean, I've made a thing myself of not saying exactly where I want to take what I'm doing. So I don't want to impinge on you the thing of like, oh, I want to be here at this point and here at this point. Like,
I'd say
it's what you want to reveal right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the project itself doesn't have an end goal. I don't know where that's going to go. I think it's more so as long as it impacts people's lives in a positive way and that it helps change their world, I've done my job.
Amazing. Well, I think we had the idea of getting Seren involved in this chat. So if you want to come up, you can do a little switcheroo, or you can sit on your lap if whatever works.
Yeah, I think you could spend a few minutes talking to him.
Yeah, just to talk through his part in the process and all of that. So
cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
Okay, we're here with Frank, aka Seren, who actually played a pretty significant role in Marc's set the other day as Altair at Il Sonic. How you doing, man?
I'm pretty good, dude. We're stoked to do the interview, man.
Yeah. So first off, I want to actually know how did Marc kind of hit you up to get involved with this project? Like, how did that come about?
Okay, so the whole Marc story started with meme rap. So me and Ragin actually were writing music in my basement, just trying to do something, but we couldn't come up with anything. It was 2 a.m, and we're like, dude, F it, we're just gonna do meme rap. And we started the whole glizzy track meme, and we're like, dude, we're gonna send it to Marc in his review stream. So he looked at it, he laughed a good bunch, and he said, you know what? I want you guys in the studio next week. We're like, okay. Okay, shit.
Yeah. Shit's going down.
Yeah. And just went to the studio, did a couple meme songs, and after that we just kept in touch, did a lot of music, and then Marc just yo, I got a couple of tracks for you to do vocals on. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm down, and basically wrote everything with him.
Amazing. So this glizzy trap thing, am I saying that right?
Glizzy, yeah.
Glizzy.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So can you, I mean, a lot of people, including my mum and dad, won't have any idea what you're talking about when you say that. So
okay.
If you could just lay out exactly what that sounds what that means.
It's basically a meme of a hot dog, okay? Like a hot dog sausage.
Can you testify to that? Is that okay?
Yeah, that is it.
Yeah.
And it became a whole sensation. And me and Ragin at 2 a.m. just did a 6-hour session that didn't come out, no music came out of it. We're just dead. And we're like, dude, let's do a glizzy song. For no apparent reason.
Right, yeah.
And just this blissful energy, I think, caught on to Marc, and I think he saw that through the track, actually.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Can you remember at all first thoughts when you heard that?
I think I wrote it live on.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
and you were cackling with laughter, pretty much. Yeah. You were just on the floor.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, what a development from memery to being on Marc's music. I mean, what was the process like in terms of melding what you can do with what he can do? Was it quite simple and straightforward, or did it take a bit of working out? Like,
Actually, it was quite simple because we started like working on other projects together, and he was he wanted like to size me up at first. So I know like how his eyes work, and he looked at me and was like, "What is this guy capable of first?" So he showed me a lot of tracks. He asked my opinion on a lot of stuff first, and at first I was like kind of reserved because, dude, I'm a nobody. I'm like just a guy came from like a small town, and this guy's like pretty much bigger than me. And I'm like, I'm not too sure. But then stuff like kind of became more comfortable as time went by, and did a lot more like opinion based stuff. And then I started to sing with him, and it basically became like really, really easy to work with that. Yeah, really was an easy process after that.
amazing. So, just for a bit of context, you were on stage, of course. You had the mic.
Yep.
Yeah, bit of a hype man for the whole show.
Yeah,
you know,
basically the MC.
exactly,
Yeah.
like getting the crowd fired up, providing the vocals as well. So, are you writing these lyrics yourself? Is it a collab thing?
It's a collab thing, but most of it, like melody wise, came like most by me and corrected by Marc. So a lot of like the lyrics, we really worked it out to get together, but the melodies, like they came in my head, and after like I just sung it to him, it was like, oh, we should do like this, and after that it became like more like a collaboration in that sense. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
And so your process for writing, what does that look like? Where do you take inspiration from? What are your main kind of influences, would you say?
Main influences, I grew up with rock and rap. That's pretty much it. My whole life I've been surrounded with music because my dad always had a band, always participated in that band. Like, for example, when I was 7 years old, I did the visuals for the show for my dad, like at the Lion d'Or in Montreal, because it's kind of a big venue. And I was like just 7, and like the passion really started from there. And basically, all the music I've listened to, like just mixed into like my inspiration, and now like melodies just come into my head. So basically, the process when I write vocals is I hear the song like 2 or 3 times, and the first melody that pops up is like most of the time the good one.
The one.
Yeah, most of the time the one, because if it's the first like melody that comes into your head, most likely is the one that is gonna get stuck in their head too. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And after like I figured out the melody, that's where we start the vocal process. And that's where like, since Marc is more in charge of the production of the album, I started by asking questions to him, like, what is the story about the track? What is the vibe you want? And basically, like, we had like a whole like mood board for the album. So if the song was like at the end, like, oh, what's the guy doing at this precise moment? Is he like coming back from the planet or stuff like that?
Right. Okay,
And then I basically like write basically like the first stuff, like the first vocals on it, and I showed it to Marc, and Marc like corrected, because my English is not perfect, like you guys can see, but
it's fantastic. His English is absolutely fantastic.
oh well, thanks. But and after that, like when the story's done, we get to recording, and the recording phase with Marc, we just like it's so in sync. Like he has an idea, like, oh yeah, that's good, we do it instantly, and yeah, just the ideas flow, and then we just have amazing results, and it's really fun to work with.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you're in the album. You're part of this new journey for Marc, which is an amazing thing in itself. You played live, of course, the other day at the festival. Just try and paint a picture for what that felt like, playing to that many people and getting them riled up and excited for that music and stuff.
Oh yeah. So obviously, like Ilsonic was my first real big show. I did a lot of shows like in the past with my band where I was the guitarist. So I played the guitar, so I wasn't really the frontman ever. And that show was the first time that I was the frontman of a show. And like being on top for like an hour and just pushing people and to give them energy. The first time I got that sense was at Crash Out in Victoriaville, which is another festival. and I did only 3 songs, but it kind of gave me the idea of how to get the crowd like enjoying the music and stuff. So like the right things to say at the right moment, etc. And when I got onto that stage at Sonic, I was like, wow, okay, this is like a lot more that I wasn't anticipating. There's a lot more people, especially with the heat. It was really hot.
So hot.
Oh yeah, it was really
a
hot.
problem. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Mark was doing all this stuff with the ordering the water cannons and stuff like that.
Oh,
It was-
yeah.
it was a lot. So
Yeah, all the people were like standing in the shade and not really vibing at first. I'm like, okay. So while I was singing, I was trying to like figure out like a solution for that. And then Mark just like started calling out the water jets. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the move. Oh yeah, and since like the water cannons like got called, everybody got into the middle and really started vibing, and then it became so easy because the crowd was already enjoying the music. And when I was like hyping them up and stuff, they were like responding and were like, "Oh yeah, okay, now it's cool."
yeah.
And after that, it just became like just so much fun.
So now that you've done it once, you feel you can just do it again and again and again. Like
Yeah, but maybe with a little more practice beforehand because Il Sonic was really like a test show for us, and we didn't like practice anything. But I feel like if now we got this experience, we can maybe practice more like move to do at this right time, this phrase to say, and maybe like create like a really like a better experience. But I'm so satisfied with the show overall. So much fun.
yeah. I mean, I think both of you did an absolutely fantastic job. I haven't actually heard the album fully through yet, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing your input on it. Of course. Yeah, man, great to have this little mini chat with you about the album.
Yeah, man, it was fun. Thanks, man.
And we are now joined by Nick, aka Ragin, who also plays a big part on the LP. Similarly to Frank, I'm interested as to how Mark got in touch with you. I know the story is similar, but also kind of how you felt in that moment with the whole whole glizzy trap thing and all that. So like, what was your first thought when this was all kind of kicking off for you guys?
Well, I want to say
I can hear them laughing already in the background about something funny is gonna happen.
when I first started the Gleazy project, that it just started as a meme, and I didn't even know where that it was coming to become like how it is today. Like, I will be part of Alter's team and part of meeting a lot of people like that. And at first, I was like, oh, we're just doing this for fun. And he's a production stream. And I just started lessons with him, and I didn't know where this is going. So yeah, I just went with the flow, and here I am. I had lessons with him. He taught me a lot of the music industry and how to work with my music, how to improve my production and create my brand, and the most important part about it. And yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really mean this when I say it, and like viewers, watchers of my channel, they'll know that I'm quite like, I have a certain I suppose range of things that I kind of look for when it comes to music appreciation. And let me tell you, this guy is absolutely one of the best up and comers in this scene at the moment, hands down.
Thank you.
I mean, Mark was showing me a load of his music in his studio. It's wild. It's wild. Like, I'm getting out the oys. I'm getting out the fucking like.
Yeah, the
getting
oys
gun
are the
thing.
best, bro. It means a
Bro,
lot.
like my eyes were popping out of my head. It was one of them. Like, I'm telling you. So he makes a wide range of different kinds of bass music. It was the D&B in particular that really like hit me. I was like, this
Thank
is
you.
mad. What kind of made you want to start making bass music in particular? Like, why was it that and not, for example, I don't know, just any other kind of music really?
I remember the first time I went to Il Sonic. It wasn't even Il Sonic, the big event. It was like Mural Festival. I saw this DJ say it was 12 Planet, and man, at first I was so curious to see why people are headbanging to songs, and I was kind of laughing about them. But when I went to my first 12 Planet set, I was like, okay, yeah, this is sick. This is sick. And I just love the vibe that everyone has together, and it was just a big party, and everyone was having fun. And then I went to Il Sonic for my first time. I wasn't into bass music at first. I was listening to more like Rehab, Kashmir,
Mm-hmm.
some big festival stuff. But,
Yeah.
but then I saw Ignition, and yeah, this is where it turned
Wow.
out. And then I started to gain a little bit more interest into bass music when I dis when I think it was when I listened to Requiem from Apache. This is where I was really like, oh, I can mix another genre with bass music, and this is where I had this first spark that I can mix Oriental stuff with bass music.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So Apache became one of my first inspiration to making this vision come true. And at first I thought, man, this is gonna be so hard to pull off. So when the pandemic hit, this is where I had time to work because at first I was studying airplane mechanic, and I wasn't really doing anything special or like playing League of Legends. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I said, yeah, I need a hobby. I need something that I can work for. And this is where I said, okay, I'm plunging into this adventure and I'm going to make music. I bought a course. I think it's like EDM Broad. Make some future bass track. Made my first, made my first track. It was named Asian Trap, and
Okay. Go on. I want to hear. I want to hear an imitation of this song.
yeah. This
Can you
this
do a
song,
little impression of the song?
If I can show this song today and where I am today, you're gonna see how I improved. Because at first I was like, "Yo, this song is banging. It's some trap, you know." And then
Yeah.
I listened to it. 3 samples were out of key, and and
These lot are all cracking up over
Yeah.
it. By the way. They're
But-
absolutely loving it.
but
Like,
this is why I always keep this song in my in my vault, so I can go back to it and tell myself that this is where I am today. And this is I always look at myself instead of comparing myself to others. And yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think you told me the other day you've been going for like 2 years or so now making music.
2 years. Man.
So, with that time under your belt, what would you say is the most enjoyable part of making music for you? Like, what's the thing that makes you go back to it again and again?
I think it's just making music stuff every day and always having someone that is pushing you. Like Marc has really been someone who's been pushing me to always go further and never stop. I at first I was making like some color based stuff for that, but when time goes, I incorporated more oriental instrument in my music, and it just turned out as a revelation to me that I can do more stuff
Mm.
and create my own sound through it. And just the creative process in it just keeps making me coming back to it because I can really mix anything.
Mhm.
And it's just fun.
Yeah.
Music production is just a video game for me. It's all it is about.
That's a really cool way of seeing it, actually. So, would you say you actually see it like a game in a way, and that you have
Yeah.
a certain end goal that you have to get
Yeah,
to?
it's actually like it's cool because you're having fun doing it, and you have a goal that's actually that you can turn it into a career and do something you like every day. And yeah, that's my words.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite genre to make?
Favorite genre? Man, that's a hard question. I think the favorite genre I
Baroque.
enjoy. I love making trap. Yeah,
Polka, yeah, okay, yeah.
trap and halftime. DNB. I'm starting to get more into it, but
It's exceptional. It
Yeah.
is. It honestly, it's a joke. But carry on.
yeah. I think DNB stuff. I feel like anything that's outside of dubstep or rhythm, I feel like are the most inspirational genre to me because I have listened to a lot of dubstep and rhythm. Every time I try to make some, it feels like I already heard it,
Mm-hmm.
and I just get stuck into it. And whenever I make like DNB, it's like the creative process just works, and it just flows. And like Disclosure, the DNB song, I remember when I wrote it, I was feeling sad at this moment, and I just wrote the intro with all the oriental instruments and the piano, and it just went flowy, and it started as a trap drop, and I said, nah, it's missing something. And I just turned the drums, I just tweak it to make it DNB. I'm like, yeah, I can try to make my first DNB song.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how Disclosure came to be.
And just comes to life.
Yeah.
And so finally, I mean, some of this material, of course, got played out live and by Marc, and you
It's crazy.
you hopped on stage when your stuff was played.
Oh, yeah.
Was that your first time on a stage hearing your music in front of that many people?
Yeah, in front of that many people. I think the last time was at Crash Out too. I had a little back-to-back with Marc. That was really fun, but not as big as Sonic.
Mm-hmm.
Sonic is a whole different game.
And how exactly did that feel?
I was not gonna lie. I was stressing that. I was waiting for the moment to Marc to play this track because I was so nervous to how will I act on stage, because I don't even know.
It's
how
difficult, isn't it? Because
It's
you're
cool,
thinking
yeah.
about your arms. I
Yeah.
think for me the most, whenever I've done something like that, my
Mhm.
arms are like, I get on stage and the arms are like this, and you
Yeah.
got to flap them about or something. So you're like this on the stage, like you just look a bit.
Yeah, but the moment I heard the collab I did with Altair, it just came naturally, and we just vibed together. Like just the three of us jumping like monkeys on the stage. That was pretty nice. That was pretty nice.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, an extremely exciting young talent for this scene, and did a great job on being a semi-hype man the other day on the stage. And yeah, very much looking forward to hearing your exact input on the album when I hear it through. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you will.
Amazing. Thanks for having this little mini chat, man.
Yes, thank you so much for the interview.
Awesome. So, in wrapping up this conversation, how exactly do you feel moving forward, taking in everything we've just talked about with you having gone through your journey here?
I think the first thing is, I'm grateful to still be here, to be able to do all of these. At this point, like, some of these projects are really insane. Like, some of the stuff that I'm not going to talk about just yet is some of the most next level shit I've ever come up with in my mind. And I'm really excited for it because it's some really cool, unique, innovative stuff. And I wouldn't be able to do it, without having had the journey that I had, having the team that I have. And at this point, it's just, looking at the sky and just being like, okay, well, what do I want to do now? There's no real specific direction. It's just a bunch of these cool things that are going to come up in the future, and just, do we want to do it? Yes, let's do it. Do we not want to do it? No. Okay, well, let's move on, I think for me at this point, anything that just respects that, like, directive line of myself where I'm able to do something that feels genuine and authentic and just feels like a happy place for me, I think that's pretty much how it's going to come up from now on.
Amazing. Well, I mean, yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm really excited for, hearing the album in full. I haven't actually done that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like if you could, I mean, we're hoping that when this is out, that the album is going to be out.
Should be.
How would
Should be.
you, if you could, because obviously you're going to have a situation, at least in part, where some people will be wanting to keep up with what you're doing post TenGraphs.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you sell this new project to them, if you could, like, in a quick summation or something similar?
I guess the album and the new sound in general is very, it's very influenced from genres like trance, wave, drum and bass, dubstep, but it's also got influences of hardcore, trap. It's just a blend of everything that's made me who I am as a musician, but it's told in a story that's non-linear sound-wise. So a lot of the introductions are going to be very vocal based, very acoustic based. Then they're going to lead into these very orchestral cinematic builds that are very, like, epic and intense, with these, really amazing arps or leads that are very synthetic, to do that, like, really contrast between the organic and the synthetic side of music. And then just leading into all these various genres of of bass music, still keeping the same intensity that I had with TenGraphs, because I do still like, the crunch of very distorted sounds, very aggressive sounds, but in a much more directed and controlled fashion where it's intended. It tells a story. It has its purpose. It's not just there because I can. It's there because I need to.
Mm.
There's a story behind each of those sounds, and they're there for a reason.
Do you think people will be able to find hints of TenGraphs in this new project?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Anybody who's liked the TenGraphs project so far is still going to hear those influences on the sound design, on the mixing, on the arrangement. A lot of people that I've already shown the music to, a lot of the people that have heard Dream Chaser as a single, or even, some of the upcoming singles, the biggest feedback that I've gotten is like, oh, it's still you, but it's, it's more melodic. It's more emotional. There's more of a story to it than there already was. And I think that was really like the nail I wanted to hit the most out of everything, was keeping that same signature, but tell a story that has so much more depth.
Awesome. Well, I mean, especially based off of what you've done before, but also having seen it in the flesh now. I was at Il Sonic the other day watching you strut your stuff with this new direction, and I must say that I'm very, very, very much looking forward to hearing it in full. Whether I do it on Twitch, on stream when it comes out, or whether I just do it in my own time, I don't know. Do you have like a what do you think I should do? What's your preferred?
I guess.
This is important, guys. This is like.
I guess the most important thing, you're gonna know this ahead of fans, but we're gonna be releasing a lot of visual art that's gonna follow with the actual album itself and all future releases, really. And it's all linked. It all has a meaning that's linked to the music, and I think having that up on a screen while you're listening to the music is going to really tell the story at its fullest at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then, throughout all the different mediums that we've got coming up, it's going to make even more sense over time.
Amazing. It's all going to tie together.
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to it. Again, this has been a great conversation.
Definitely.
I just want to take this opportunity as well to, thank you and all you guys as well for just making my stay here so wonderful and like seamless, and just been lovely. Like, I hadn't been to Canada before, and you've all been so great in just making me feel comfortable and all of that. So appreciate that a lot.
It's great having you.
But yeah, I mean, I think we've come to the end of this conversation, this podcast. Is there any kind of final things that you want to say or sign off with?
No, I just want to say, like, I'm really thankful and grateful for everybody who's supported me throughout everything that I've, put them through at this point, because I push my team to the absolute brink, because I demand even more of myself, and they delivered, they over delivered. The fans, because they just keep coming back, man, and the amount of support I get from some of my fans, like Sonic's here with us right now as we're recording this. She flew 27 hours from Australia. She got my face tattooed on her. Like, that's the type of stuff, to me, it's crazy. It's crazy because it's those things as an individual that you can't take for granted. That's so many human lives that are affected, and I will never be able to thank people enough for that, because I'm able to do the things I love, put food on the table, and just keep doing it. And that has no price.
And it really shows, I think with you in particular, like, just radiating that pure positive energy. It's so clear that you love what you're doing. And I'm just, I've only properly known you for like half a year maybe, but I feel great that you feel great that you're in that position where you've made this step and you're confident with it and you're moving forward. It's a special thing when you stumble across something like that and it just feels so right for you. And I can just see that reflected completely in how you are. So, yeah, off the back of that, thank you again for hopping on the channel, having this chat.
Thank you.
And what I'm going to do now is something potentially a little bit corny, but I'm going to say, keep it naughty to that camera. And then you're going to say, if it's naughty, then to that camera.
If it's naughty, then
No,
you
no,
know.
not yet. Not don't get
Like
ahead
that.
of yourself.
No, but like that with the
Oh
whole,
yeah, with the
whole
English accent. Yeah, obviously
okay.
with the English accent, and then we're
Alright,
both
alright.
gonna go, and I'll see you in the next one to that one. So do you get it? So I'll
so
go keep it naughty to that one.
Mhm.
Then you go if it's naughty, then you know, and then we go and I'll see you in the next one.
Okay, if it's naughty, then you know. I got to remember that one.
So we'll see how well this goes, right? But
it's gonna go horribly.
we'll see. But keep it naughty.
If it's naughty, no. See, I told you I'd fuck it up.
And I shall see you
In the next
next one. Peace.